Welcome to Nancy's Classic Bedtime Stories. Tonight's classic read is from Let Us Talk of Many Things by William F. Buckley, Jr., The Collected Speeches. Today we are educated men. This is the Class Day oration at Yale University, New Haven, Connecticut on June 11th, 1950. A senior is tapped to give the Class Day oration, elected to do so by Yale Class Council. There was some apprehension when my name was announced because earlier that year I had been selected by the administration to be the student speaker at the annual Alumni Day festivity on Washington's birthday. For that occasion, I wrote a talk critical of what I believed to be the bias in thinking in the faculty. Collectivist in political and economic orientation, secular and humanistic in other studies. There was much alarm over the prospective ventilation of such views to 1,000 visiting alumni, and for the sake of decorum, I withdrew the speech. It was published as an appendix to my first book, God and Man at Yale. My Class Day oration, although otherwise pretty conventional, hints at such concerns against the historical backdrop. 5 years earlier, we had won the World War, but the struggle for the world was at a high pitch. The Soviet Union had gobbled up Eastern Europe, exploded a nuclear bomb, and encouraged the communists in China, who overthrew the nationalist government, exiled now to Taiwan. 2 weeks after Class Day, the Korean War would break out, involving the United States in a 3-year-long military campaign. On the home front, President Truman was adamantly encouraging an expansion of the New Deal. So we begin. A year ago, the orator for the class of 1949 stood here and told his classmates that the troubles of the United States in particular, and of Western democracy in general, were attributable to the negativism of our front against communism. His was not a lone voice jarring smug opinion in mid-20th century America. Rather, he is part of the swelling forefront of men and women who are raising a hue and a cry for what they loosely call positivism, by which they mean bold new measures, audacious steps forward, a reorientation towards those great new horizons and that brave new world. It is natural at this point to realize that although we must be very careful how we put it, we are, as Yale men, privileged members of our society, and to us falls the responsibility of leadership in this great new positivist movement. For we have had a great education, and our caps and gowns weigh heavy upon us as we face our responsibilities to mankind. All of us here have been exposed to 4 years' education in one of the most enlightened and advanced liberal arts colleges in the world. Here we can absorb the last word in most fields of academic endeavor. Here we find the headquarters of a magazine devoted exclusively to metaphysics, and another devoted entirely to an analysis of French existentialism. And here, for better or for worse, we have been jolted forcefully from any preconceived judgments we may have had when we came. Here we can find men who will tell us that Jesus Christ was the greatest fraud that history had known. Oh, I don't buy that. Here we can find men who will tell us that morality is an anachronist conception rendered obsolete by the advances of human thought. From Neo-Benthamites at Yale, we can learn that laws are a sociological institution to be wielded to facilitate the sacrosanct will of the enlightened minority. Communism is a real force to cope with only because of the deficiency of democracy. Our fathers who worked to send us to Yale, their fathers and their fathers who made Yale and the United States, were hard-working men, shrewd men, and performed a certain economic service, but they were dreadfully irresponsible, in view of today's enlightenment. And so it goes. 2 and 2 make 3. The shortest distance between 2 points is a crooked line. Good is bad and bad is good. And from the morass, we are to extract a workable, enlightened synthesis to govern our thoughts and our actions, for today we are educated men. Nothing it is true, is healthier than honest scrutiny, with maybe even a little debunking thrown in. When a dean tells us that our task is to go out and ennoble mankind, we nod our heads and wonder whether the opening in the putty knife factory or in the ball-bearing works will pay more. When we are told that Lincoln was totally unconcerned with politics, we might ponder the occasion in 1863 when he could not focus his attention on the questions of a distinguished visitor because he was terribly worried over what Republican to appoint postmaster of Chicago. In 1913, Charles Beard wrote his economic interpretation of the Constitution. It was banned in 7 state universities and brought almost nationwide ostracism for the author. Today, a study of this analysis is a prerequisite to a doctoral degree in American history. Certainly, civilization cannot advance without freedom of inquiry. This fact is self-evident. What seems equally self-evident is that in the process of history, certain immutable truths have been revealed and discovered, and that their value is not subject to the limitations of time and space. The probing, the relentless debunking, has engendered a skepticism that threatens to pervade and atrophy all our values. In apologizing for our beliefs and our traditions, we have bent over backwards so far that we have lost our balance, and we see a topsy-turvy world, and we say topsy-turvy things, such as that the way to be communism is by making our democracy better. What a curious self-examination. Beat the union of Soviet socialist republics by making America socialistic. Beat atheism by denying God. Uphold individual freedom by denying natural rights. We neglect to say to the communists, in the name of heaven, look at what we now have. Your standards don't interest us. As Emerson threatened to say to the obstreperous government tax collector, if you pursue, I will slit your throat, sir. The credo of the so-called positivists is categorized by the advocacy of change. Pardon my throat. I'm really having trouble with my throat tonight. Republicanism, on the other hand, is negativism because conservatives believe that America has grown and has prospered, has put muscle on her bones by rewarding initiative and industry, by conceding to her citizens not only the right and responsibilities of self-government, but also the right and responsibilities of self-care, of individual earned security. The role of the so-called conservative is a difficult one. A starry-eyed young man, nevertheless, aggressive in his wisdom, flaunting the badge of custodian of the common man, approaches our neat, sturdy White House and tells us we must destroy it, rebuild it of crystallized cold cream, and paint it purple. But we like it the way it is, we retort feebly. Rip her down. This is a changing world. Is our effort to achieve perspective all the more difficult by virtue of having gone to Yale? In many respects it is, because the university does not actively aid us in forming an enlightened synthesis. That job is for us to perform, to reject those notions that do not square with the enlightenment that should be ours as moral, educated men, beneficiaries of centuries of historical experience. Yale has given us much, not least is an awesome responsibility to withstand her barrage, to emerge from her halls with both feet on the ground, with a sane head and a reinforced set of values. If our landing is accomplished, we are stronger men for the fight. Keenly aware, then, of the vast deficiencies in American life today, the suffering, the injustice, the want, we must nevertheless spend our greatest efforts, it seems to me, in preserving the framework that supports the vaster bounties that make our country an oasis of freedom and prosperity. Our concern for deficiencies in America must not cause us to indict the principles that have allowed our country, its faults notwithstanding, to tower over the nations of the world as a citadel of freedom and wealth. With what severity and strength we can muster, we must punch the gas bag of cynicism and skepticism and thank Providence for what we have and must retain. Our distillation of the ideas, concepts, and theories expounded at Yale must serve to enhance our devotion to the good in what we have, to reinforce our allegiance to our principles, to convince us that our outlook is positive, that the retention of the best features of our way of life is the most enlightened and noble of goals. Insofar as the phrase "for God, for country, and for Yale" is meaningful, we need not be embarrassed to mean for God as we know him, for country as we know it, and for Yale as we have known her. And there you have it. That was the first speech delivered in the 50s by William F. Buckley, Jr. Forgive me for my throat. I'm a little challenged this evening, but I hope you enjoyed it. Good night.